Yesterday morning, the phone rang just as I was pouring my first cup of coffee. I saw Ryan's name flash across the screen, and something in me tensed before I even answered. When I picked up, his voice came out ragged, almost breaking. "Mom," he gasped, "why are all the cards declined?" Dana and I couldn't pay for lunch. We were at the restaurant with her mother, people were laughing at us. Everyone's staring. It's humiliating. For a second, I just stood there in my kitchen, watching the steam rise from my cup. His panic should have cut through me, the way a mother feels her child's pain like it's her own. But instead, I felt a surge of satisfaction. A dark, quiet relief that I never thought I'd feel. Toward my own son, but if you really want to understand why that call didn't break me, why it almost felt like justice, you need to know what happened the night before it started in my living room. The place I used to consider the heart of our family. I was serving coffee, refilling cups for Ryan, for Dana, for the friends they had invited over. I was tired but happy, or at least I thought I was. Hosting family, being useful, that had been my purpose for so many years. Then Dana laughed, leaning toward her friends with that casual cruelty she wears like perfume. "That old woman is only good for paying our bills." The words weren't even whispered. They rolled out in the open air of my own home, in front of guests. Like it was the funniest thing she'd ever said. And Ryan, my son, my boy I raised with my own hands, he threw back his head and laughed along with her. No hesitation. No correction. No defense of his mother's dignity. Just laughter. I froze with the coffee pot still in my hand. The liquid trembled in the glass carafe, threatening to spill, and I realized my whole body was shaking. Not from sadness. Not from weakness. But from something colder, sharper, rage, because in that moment, as their laughter echoed in my living room, the truth finally slammed into me. To them, I wasn't a mother. I wasn't even a person. I was a walking bank account. An ATM with legs, and the cruelest part? I had allowed it. For over a decade, I had been their safety net, their financial salvation. 10 years of solving every crisis, bailing them out of every bad decision. Carrying them when they should have been walking on their own. When Ryan lost his job, I paid his rent, 8 months straight at $800 a month. Money stripped from my pension while he sat at home, promising he'd get back on his feet soon. When Dana wanted a whole new wardrobe to look professional, $3,000 went on my credit card. Silk blouses, tailored skirts, shoes she claimed she needed to succeed. When they wanted to celebrate surviving so much stress with a trip to Hawaii, $5,000 disappeared from my savings. A romantic vacation, they told me. Just the two of them. "You understand, right, Mom?" Ryan had said. "It's not really a trip for you." And I had understood. Or at least, I told myself I did. I always nodded, always paid, always stayed quiet. And while they sipped cocktails on sandy beaches, I sat alone in my little house, waiting for postcards that never came. Then, 3 months ago, Dana's voice turned syrupy sweet. The way it always did when she wanted something expensive. "Georgia," she said, placing her manicured hand over mine, "the car is getting too old. And if we're going to have kids soon, we need something safe." $15,000. A down payment that gutted nearly 2 years of savings. But I paid it. I always paid. I told myself it was for the good of the family. And still, it wasn't enough. So when Dana mocked me in my own home, when Ryan laughed instead of defending me, something in me snapped. Or maybe it finally woke up. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from sorrow, but from clarity. A clarity that burned hotter than grief. At 3 in the morning, I sat at my computer with a cup of cold coffee and finally did what I should have done years ago. I canceled every additional card in their names. All 5 of them. Cards they had swiped at restaurants, boutiques, spas, as if they were entitled to my money. I closed the shared savings account. The one I had poured money into every month for emergencies. Funny how those emergencies always looked a lot like fine dining, expensive gadgets, and shopping bags from designer stores. I changed every password to my online accounts. Locked them out completely, and then I shut off the automatic transfers, the lifelines they had grown addicted to. By 6 in the morning, it was done. I poured myself another coffee and sat in my favorite chair. For the first time in years, the silence in my house felt peaceful instead of lonely. I knew the phone would ring. I knew there would be outrage, panic, fury. But I also knew I was ready. At exactly 9:15, the screen lit up with Ryan's name. I let it ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. Each ring was a drumbeat of my newfound freedom. Finally, I answered. His voice burst through, desperate, frantic. "Mom, why are the cards declined? We're at Crestview Grill with Dana's mother. We can't pay for lunch. Everyone's staring. What's happening?" The irony almost made me laugh. Crestview Grill, the most expensive restaurant in town, the same one I had paid for countless times but was never once invited to join them. Now, here they were, surrounded by the people they wanted to impress, exposed for what they really were. I took a slow sip of my coffee before I spoke. Good morning, Ryan, I said calmly. The cards are cancelled because I've decided I will no longer finance your lifestyle. There was silence, then a strangled shout. What? Are you crazy? Dana's mother is here. Do you know how this looks? How am I supposed to explain this? I leaned back in my chair. What's ridiculous, Ryan, is hearing you laugh last night when your wife said I was only good for paying your bills. What's ridiculous is realizing that for 10 years, I've been nothing but an ATM to my own son. The line went quiet, except for the muffled voices in the background. Dana, probably demanding answers, the clinking of dishes, the low murmur of curious onlookers. Ryan's voice returned, smaller this time. Mom, please. Not now. We can talk later, but I need you to reactivate the cards. Just for today. I promise, no more promises. I cut him off. For 10 years, I've heard the same line. Just this once. Just today. And for 10 years, I've paid the price. But yesterday made one thing clear: you don't respect me. You don't value me. And you certainly don't love me the way I loved you. Dana was joking, he blurted. You know how she is. I know exactly how she is, I interrupted. And I know exactly how you are. That's why I made my decision. I could hear him breathing hard, almost panting with panic. The restaurant must have been watching now, every pair of eyes on him. His golden image cracking. Mom, he pleaded. We can't stand here like this. Do you want us to wash dishes? Should we call the police? This is humiliating. I let his words hang in the air for a moment before replying, my voice as cold as the coffee beside me. Now you know how I felt for years. The difference is, you're 35. You should have learned long ago how to solve your own problems. Cruel, he hissed, the word landing like a slap through the speaker. This isn't like you, Mom. You've never been this cruel. I almost laughed. Cruel? After years of scraping my pension to cover their emergencies? After being left alone on holidays while they posted photos from beach cabanas I'd paid for? After hearing my own son laugh when I was reduced to a punchline in my living room? Cruel, I repeated softly, letting the word settle. Cruel was last night, Ryan. Cruel was turning your mother into a joke. Cruel was treating me like a wallet with a heartbeat. What I'm doing today has another name: boundaries. In the background, I heard Dana's clipped whisper. What did she say? Put it on speaker. A muffled shuffle, a clink of flatware, the hush of an expensive dining room. Pausing to listen, Ryan tried again, switching tactics. Look, Mom, we can talk like adults later. Just fix the cards for today. We're with Dana's mother. The waiter's waiting with the bill. This is embarrassing. Embarrassing, I echoed. How interesting that you only feel embarrassment when your image is on the line. Not when you hand me your responsibilities. Not when you use my money and call it ours. Not when you sit in my home and laugh with strangers at the woman who raised you. Silence. Then a strained, theatrical sniffle, not Ryan's. Dana's voice slid onto the line, syrupy sweet. Georgia, hi. It's me. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Yesterday I was just joking with my girlfriends. You know how we women are when we get together, sometimes we say things without thinking. I said. Is that what we're calling it? A joke? Yes, she crooned, leaning hard on the performance. Just a poor choice of words. We love you. Really. Now could you please, just this once, reactivate? No, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain myself twice. I set my mug down and let the single word hang there, clean and final. The weight in the background grew heavier, like a room holding its breath. Then Ryan's panic spiked. Mom, if you don't help, we can't pay. Do you want us to be thrown out? Do you want them to call the police? What am I supposed to do? Be an adult, I said. Find a solution that doesn't involve me. You're my mother. Exactly. I kept my tone cool. I'm your mother, not your employee. Not your personal bank. Not your financial lifeline. On the other end, chairs scraped. I pictured him sweating, Dana's mother frowning, the waiter hovering with that tight smile that says he's seen everything and none of it surprises him. A murmur rippled through the dining room, the sound of high society pretending not to stare. Mom, Ryan said again, quieter now, almost a whisper. Please. Have mercy. Mercy is earned, I answered. Over years. It's not something you demand when the check arrives. Then what do you want us to do? His voice cracked. Wash dishes? I want you to learn, I said. And learning starts now. I ended the call. My finger hovered over the screen for a moment, expecting the usual wash of guilt, of maternal ache, of that conditioned reflex to rush in and fix everything. It didn't come. In its place, a steady hum of clarity. A stillness I hadn't felt in years. The phone rang again. I let it. It rang 3 more times. I put it face down, walked to the sink, and rinsed my cup. Outside, the morning was bright and shameless. Birds were busy at the feeder. The world did not tremble just because my son was finally meeting a consequence. For the next half hour, the calls kept coming, Ryan, then Dana, then an unknown number I assumed was her mother. I let them pass like waves hitting a seawall. Each ignored call felt like one more stone in the foundation I should have laid a decade ago. Around 11, I heard tires crunch on my driveway, the familiar engine I'd helped pay for. 2 car doors slammed. Footsteps charged up the walk, and then fists pounded my oak door, the one my late husband had sanded and stained by hand. Mom. Open the door. We need to talk. Ryan's voice, pitched high with embarrassment and anger. I know you're in there. Your car is in the driveway. I didn't move. I sat in my chair in the back patio, invisible from the front, and watched a cardinal bully a sparrow for seed. You've done enough bullying, I murmured, not to the bird, Georgia. Dana now, sharp, commanding. We know you're inside. Stop acting like a child and come face us. I let out an incredulous laugh. Face them, as if I'd done something wrong. As if I had to justify myself for protecting the money I spent a lifetime earning. The pounding intensified, fists turning to feet. The door shuddered under the kicks. This is ridiculous, Dana spat. You made us look like beggars. Ryan's mother-in-law had to pay for our lunch. A 70-year-old woman had to pull out cash because her daughter-in-law is a lunatic. So that's how it had ended. Claudia, all class and pearls, fishing bills from a pristine wallet while the waiter pretended not to notice the spectacle. I imagined Dana's smile pulled too tight, Ryan's face flushed. The humiliation must have been exquisite. The symmetry even more so. Mom, please, Ryan begged. People were filming. It's going to be all over social media. There it was, the core anxiety. Not the harm they'd done. Not the years they drained me. The optics. The audience. The performance collapsing on stage, the banging paused, replaced by furious whispers on my porch. Strategy session. I could practically see the flowchart of manipulations they'd used on me for years: anger, guilt, shame, pity, threat. And now they chose the next square, Georgia. Dana's voice floated to the side window. Softer, reshaped. I know you're upset. You have every right. I didn't mean what I said. I was being silly. We all say things in front of friends. Please open the door. Let's talk as a family. I stood and walked to the side window. Pulled the curtain an inch. Our eyes met through the glass. Her expression bloomed into one of rehearsed relief. There you are, she cooed. Come on, open up. I held her gaze for a long, quiet beat. Then I let the curtain fall. Her shriek cracked across the porch. The pounding resumed, then faltered. More whispers. The front steps creaked as they shifted, indecision settling in. The phone started up again. I silenced it. For the first time in years, the house felt like mine, my air, my chair, my quiet. They stayed nearly an hour, the knocks dwindling from thunder to drizzle. I heard Dana suggest calling a locksmith. Ryan muttered that it would be breaking and entering. Even in their desperation, they still knew a line not to cross. Finally, the car doors slammed again. The engine reversed down my drive. Peace poured back into the bones of my home like warm light. It didn't last long. At 3 o'clock, my phone lit up with unfamiliar numbers. Claudia first, her voice polished and firm. Georgia, dear. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Dana told me what happened, and surely we can resolve this like civilized adults. I hung up. Next came my sister, Elaine, sounding alarmed. She lives out of state and had clearly been fed a narrative with all the edges filed off. Georgia, are you all right? Ryan says you left them stranded at a restaurant and canceled all their cards without warning. Are you feeling okay? I'm perfectly fine, I told her. Better than I've felt in years. But he says you're being radical. Radical, I repeated. Do you think it's normal to pay your adult son's rent for 8 months? To finance vacations you're not invited to? To be mocked in your own home? Silence. Then a careful, well, parents help. That's normal. Is being an ATM normal? I asked. Because that's what I've been. She didn't have an answer to that. By the time I unplugged the house phone and set my cell to airplane mode, the sun had shifted across the patio. The garden threw long shadows. I made myself dinner, an actual dinner, not the hasty toast I'd gotten used to when I expected a crisis call. I ate every bite. I tasted it. I could feel space clearing in my head, like fog lifting over a field, patterns sharpened. 10 years of them. They'd bring me a temporary problem. I'd resist. They'd press, just this once, what will people think, we're desperate. I'd cave. They'd solve it with my money. A few weeks later, a new emergency would be born. Rinse. Repeat. Not once did a repayment plan exist. Not once did they say, come enjoy what you paid for. I financed dinners and ate alone. I covered medical bills, and no one asked about my blood pressure. I sent them to the ocean and sat home watching waves on television, enough. I carried my determination to the study and pulled out 5 years of bank statements. I made columns, added lines, circled charges. Streaming services I never watched. Gym memberships I'd never stepped foot in. Magazines that didn't even have my taste. Tiny monthly nicks that added up to bruises. When I finished the rough tally, my pencil hovered above a number that squeezed my chest. $86,000. In 5 years, and that didn't include the years before I started keeping careful records. More than half my pension. More than many people make in 2 years of work. And in exchange for that, indifference. Entitlement. Laughter. I sat very still, the sounds of the house ticking around me. Then I stood, walked to the file cabinet, and pulled out my will. 5 years ago, I had written it with hope and trust. Everything, house, savings, investments, was Ryan's. I'd wanted to protect him, to honor our family, to give him the stability I scraped together all my life. Now I read it with new eyes. Why leave a fortune to someone who already spent it before I die? Why reward someone who treats my generosity like an account balance? Tomorrow, I decided, I'd call Mr. Coleman, my attorney. We'd change things. If Ryan insisted on treating me like a bank, he could be content with the interest, not the principal. I slept like a stone. In the morning, sunlight filtered through my curtains, soft and gold. I brewed coffee, plugged the phone back in, and listened to the messages that had stacked in the night. Dana's tearful appeal. Ryan's panicked monologue about the closed, shared account, ours, he called it, as if language could turn my money into community property. Elaine again, urging moderation. And then one that made me actually laugh, Oscar, Dana's cousin's husband. Offering a man's perspective, telling me women complicate things and that family is the most important thing. Family is the most important thing, until family becomes a synonym for unpaid labor. At 9 sharp, I called Mr. Coleman's office. A cancellation had opened a 2 o'clock slot. Perfect. I booked it. Then I phoned my bank manager and scheduled a security review, passwords, 2-factor, and a firm instruction that no one, not even my son, was to receive information about my accounts. As I was gathering my purse to leave, the doorbell rang. For a heartbeat, I braced for round 2. But when I checked the peephole, it was my neighbor, Lucy. 62, kind eyes, recently widowed. We'd shared small talk over the fence, but she'd never come to my door. Good morning, Georgia, she said, warm and simple. I heard the commotion yesterday and wanted to make sure you're okay. I let her in and made fresh coffee. We sat at my table, 2 women who had learned the hard way that love without boundaries becomes a leash. I told her the broad strokes. She listened without interrupting, just nodding, her gaze steady. Can I admit something? She asked, setting her cup down. I've watched your son and Dana for years. I've seen the new cars, the designer bags, the phones. Meanwhile, you drive the same old sedan and clip coupons. I kept wondering if anyone was looking out for you. I never saw them carry a single grocery bag for you. The word stung and soothed at once. The truth often does. Being a good mother, she added softly, doesn't mean being a martyr. You can love your children without laying yourself on the altar. After she left, I carried her sentence with me like a talisman. At the bank, the manager and I locked down my finances. At a small cafe afterward, I ordered the most expensive lunch on the menu and a glass of wine. The bill was $45, less than a girls' night I'd funded without tasting a bite. I ate slowly. Every flavor felt like it belonged to me. At 2, I sat in Mr. Coleman's office with a folder thick with statements. He wasn't surprised. More common than you think, he murmured, scanning the totals. We sketched a new plan, charity, my sister, and a modest, conditional portion for Ryan, one that required proof of independence, not entitlement. When I pulled into my driveway at dusk, an unfamiliar car was parked neatly out front. A woman stepped from the porch, polished as a magazine ad. Claudia, pearls, perfume, that smile that never reaches the eyes. Georgia, she said, gliding toward me, we need a woman-to-woman talk. I let her in. Sometimes it's useful to hear the script read aloud. Dana told me everything, she began. I think you're exaggerating. Canceling your own son's cards over a simple joke between women? Very extreme. I see, I said. Do you give your adult daughter unlimited cards? Do you pay her rent? Fund her vacations while you stay home? That's different. Exactly, I said. And so is this. When guilt failed, she shifted to fear. Think what people will say. At church. In the family. I've already thought about what I say, I answered. To myself. Finally, she dropped the mask. They're considering legal options. There are ways to have a person declared mentally incompetent if they begin making erratic financial choices. There it was, the nuclear option. If coercion fails, Claim the vault is unguarded, Claudia, I said, standing. A competent woman protecting herself from financial abuse is not erratic. It's responsible. I spoke to my attorney today. You should speak to yours. Her face flickered, calculation, then retreat. I didn't mean, you did, I said, walking her to the door. And now that I know exactly where you stand, this conversation is over. When the door shut behind her, the house didn't feel empty. It felt fortified. That night, I called Mr. Coleman and told him about the threat. He advised me to document everything, record what I could, and consider a preventative psychological evaluation. Evidence of clarity no court could ignore. I slept. Not as deeply as the night before, but with something fiercer than rest, resolve. Saturday morning broke with a crisp blue sky. The kind of weather that used to tempt me into yard sales or long walks with my late husband. Instead, I brewed a strong pot of coffee and drove myself to a private clinic. Mr. Coleman's words echoed in my mind: document your clarity. Protect yourself. The psychologist, Dr. Harper, was a composed woman in her 50s with silver streaks in her dark hair. She greeted me warmly, led me into her office, and asked why I had come. For 2 hours, I spoke, not just about Ryan and Dana, but about the years of slow erosion, the pattern of demands, the manipulations. I answered her tests, solved puzzles, recalled dates. I talked about how I'd balanced my household finances for decades, raised a son as a widow, managed my pension and savings with discipline. At the end, she set her pen down and looked at me with quiet conviction. Mrs. Whitlock, she said, you are one of the most lucid, self-aware patients I've ever evaluated. Recognizing abuse, setting boundaries, and protecting your assets are the marks of competence, not decline. In fact, I'd say you're showing more rationality now than when you allowed the exploitation. She handed me a stamped and signed report declaring full psychological competence. This is your shield, she said. Keep it safe. Walking out of that office with the document in hand, I felt like I'd been handed armor. When I returned home, Lucy was bent over her flower beds, pruning marigolds. She straightened when she saw me and hurried to the fence. Georgia, she called, an older woman came by yesterday asking questions about you. Wanted to know if you'd been acting strangely. Claudia, no doubt. Fishing for dirt to feed her narrative. What did you tell her? I asked. Lucy frowned. I told her you seem happier and calmer than I've ever seen you. That you look more alive since you stopped. Well, you know. Stopped being their ATM, I finished with a bitter chuckle. That's right. Her eyes hardened. It's disgusting, what they're trying to pull. Don't let them scare you. Her solidarity warmed me. After she went back to her garden, I lingered on the porch, savoring the ordinary hum of a Saturday: lawnmowers, children riding bikes, dogs barking. Life continued, simple and unremarkable. And for once, mine felt like it belonged to me. That afternoon, Lucy surprised me again. She tapped at my back door with a mischievous smile. Georgia, you need to get out. You've been carrying this mess for too long. When's the last time you did something just for fun? I had to think. The question itself felt foreign. Fun? My life had been structured around duty, around needs that weren't mine. There's a 5-day cruise leaving Wednesday, she continued. I was supposed to go with my sister, but she had to cancel. Why don't you come with me? The idea lit something inside me. 5 days away from ringing phones, away from manipulations, away from the constant drain. 5 days of ocean air and no one asking for money. I would love to, I said before hesitation could creep in. We booked it that evening. $1,500, less than what I had dropped on Ryan and Dana's last single vacation. But this time, it would be for me. Sunday morning, as I sorted clothes to pack, the doorbell rang. Ryan stood on my porch alone, looking like a ghost of himself. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair unkempt, dark circles bruised his eyes. Mom, he said, voice cracking. Please. Can we talk? Just us. No shouting. No Dana. Against my better judgment, I let him in. He sank into the couch, shoulders sagging. Mom, I'm desperate. The car insurance is due tomorrow, $250. I don't have it. If it lapses, I can't drive legally. If I can't drive, I can't get to work. How much did you earn last month? I asked. He rubbed his forehead. $3,500. And where is it now? We have expenses: rent, food, utilities, and restaurants? Streaming services? Gym memberships? He flushed. That's different. Those are necessities. Necessities, I repeated, raising an eyebrow. Entertainment subscriptions are necessities? Mom, you don't understand. You can't live like a hermit in this world. People expect. There it is, I cut in. Expectation. That word has ruled your life. Expectations Dana has. Expectations her friends set. But when did you ever stop to consider my expectations? My pressure? My sacrifices? For once, he was silent. His eyes flickered down, as if the truth was too heavy to meet. Ryan, I continued, my voice steady. You're 35. College educated. Employed. Why can't you pay a $250 bill? Why haven't you ever lived within your means? Ever considered moving to a cheaper apartment? Cutting luxuries? Making a budget? He shifted uncomfortably. Mom, those are unfair questions. No, I said. What's unfair is demanding that your mother bankrupt herself so you can keep playing at a lifestyle you can't afford. His eyes glistened. For the first time in years, I saw shame flicker across his face. I thought. His voice cracked. I thought you liked helping us. That it was your way of showing love. It was, I admitted. But you turned my love into obligation. You turned my generosity into expectation. And worst of all, you turned my sacrifice into mockery. Tears spilled down his cheeks. He buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking. Minutes passed in silence, the air heavy with a decade's worth of truth. Finally, he lifted his head. His eyes were red, but his voice steadier. What can I do to fix this? Start, I said, by paying your own car insurance. He nodded slowly, like a man hearing his sentence and accepting its justice. He stayed nearly an hour, quiet for most of it. When he finally stood, he said, Mom, I'll figure it out. And I'll talk to Dana about our expenses. We need to change. I didn't fully believe him. But it was the first time he'd used, we need to change, instead of, you need to help. That alone was a shift. Monday morning. While I finished packing, a text arrived from Ryan. Mom, I got a personal loan for the insurance. Also found a cheaper apartment. We're moving next month. Just wanted you to know that it wasn't much. But it was something. Later that day, the phone rang again. Dana's name on the screen. I braced myself for venom, but her voice, when I answered, was calm, almost weary. Georgia, could we meet? Just us. No Ryan. No drama. Curiosity got the better of me. I agreed. We sat across from each other in a small cafe. She wore no designer jewelry, no flashy handbag, just a plain blouse and tired eyes. She stirred her coffee for a long time before speaking. I want to apologize, she said finally. For what I said. It was cruel. Disrespectful. I was wrong. I held her gaze. What made you realize that? She let out a breath. The restaurant. The humiliation. And these past few days? Facing the truth about our finances without your help. Georgia, we spend nearly double what we earn. You've been covering the gap all along. Without you, it's like we're free falling. Her honesty surprised me. For once, there was no performance in her voice, no sugarcoating. Just fear. We have to move, she admitted. Cut memberships. Cancel subscriptions. We've been pretending to live a life we can't afford. And we only managed it because of you. I sipped my coffee and waited. Georgia, she whispered, when did you start resenting us? I didn't hesitate. When you stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a resource. She nodded, shame pooling in her expression. You're right. That's exactly what we did. We sat in silence for a while. Finally, she asked, is there any way to rebuild our relationship? The old relationship is gone, I told her. That was built on me giving and you taking. If there's to be a new one, it must be based on respect. On independence. On the understanding that my value isn't measured in dollars. She bit her lip, nodded slowly. Then we'll have to learn. Because I don't want to lose you, Georgia. By Wednesday morning, my suitcase was zipped, my passport tucked into the front pocket of my purse. Lucy honked from the driveway, her face bright with excitement through the windshield. For once, I didn't feel guilty leaving home behind. The house would be fine. The world would keep spinning. And I would finally breathe. We boarded the ship just after noon. The air smelled like salt and sunscreen, a mix I hadn't inhaled since I was a young woman. Our cabin was modest but comfortable, with a small porthole framing the endless blue of the ocean. Lucy insisted we unpack only what we needed and head straight to the deck. Standing at the railing, the sea stretching in every direction, I felt something I hadn't in years, insignificance, in the best way. Out here, my son's panic, Dana's entitlement, Claudia's threats, none of it mattered. The waves didn't care about my bank accounts or my broken boundaries. They just kept moving, timeless and sure. The first evening, Lucy and I joined a table of strangers for dinner. A retired teacher from Ohio, a widowed couple from Florida, two sisters celebrating a milestone birthday. We shared stories, laughed over clumsy waiters, and marveled at the sunset turning the water gold. Not once did anyone ask me for money. Not once did I feel like an ATM. I was just Georgia, a woman with a story and a glass of wine. Later, lying in my cabin bed, I realized I hadn't thought about Ryan or Dana in hours. It startled me, like discovering an ache had vanished without me noticing. On the second day, the ship docked in Nassau. Lucy and I joined a tour of the old town, wandering cobbled streets painted in pastels, buying small trinkets from vendors. At one stall, I picked up a silver locket etched with waves. The vendor told me it symbolized release. Without hesitation, I bought it. It felt like a charm for this new chapter. That night, under a sky littered with stars, Lucy and I sat on deck chairs wrapped in blankets. She leaned her head back, eyes closed. "I feel alive out here," she murmured. "So do I admitted. It's been so long since I remembered what that felt like." On the third day, a message came through the ship's Wi-Fi. "Ryan. Mom, I know you're away. I hope you're safe. I wanted to tell you, we signed a lease for a smaller apartment. Rent's half of what we were paying. Dana sold some designer handbags online. We're cutting down." I'm trying. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, the waves rolling beneath me. Was it genuine change, or another tactic? I couldn't know. But I felt no urge to reply right away. For once, their problems weren't mine to solve. The fourth evening brought a formal dinner. Lucy convinced me to wear a dress I hadn't pulled from my closet in years, a navy gown with a soft shimmer. As we entered the ballroom, heads turned. Not because I was wealthy. Not because I was paying. But because I was present. Alive. Smiling. A gentleman asked me to dance. I declined politely, but the compliment lingered. It had been a long time since I felt seen as a woman, not a resource. On the final day at sea, Lucy and I stood at the bow, hair whipping in the wind. "What will you do when you go back?" she asked. I considered. "Protect myself," I said simply. "I've already spoken with my lawyer. My finances are locked down. My will is changed. Ryan and Dana will have to live on what they earn, not on what I bleed. If they want a relationship, they'll have to rebuild it with respect." Lucy squeezed my hand. "Good. You deserve that." When we docked back home, I felt different. Stronger. Lighter. The locket around my neck glinted in the morning sun as if sealing the transformation. Back at my house, I expected silence. Instead, a letter waited in the mailbox. Handwritten. "From Ryan. Mom, I know I hurt you. I know Dana did too. What we said and did was unforgivable. But I want to change. We're in the new apartment now. It's small, but it's ours. I got rid of the second car. Dana's looking for part-time work. I can't promise it will be easy, but I promise we'll try. We miss you. I miss you. Please give us a chance to prove ourselves." I read it twice. It wasn't flowery. It wasn't manipulative. For once, it wasn't even asking for money. I placed it on the mantel and sat in my chair, the same chair where I had first cancelled their cards. My phone buzzed, another message, this time from Dana. "We'd like to invite you to dinner. At our place. We'll cook. No restaurants. No bills. Just us." The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I had paid for meals I was never invited to. And now, at last, an invitation. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I closed my eyes and listened to the silence of my home. The kind of silence that comes not from emptiness, but from peace. Whatever came next, it would be on my terms. Saturday evening, just before 6, I stood outside Ryan and Dana's new apartment. It was smaller than their last one by a mile, no gleaming lobby, no polished brass fixtures, no valet parking. Just a modest brick building with peeling paint and the faint smell of curry drifting from a neighbor's kitchen. I almost turned back. My stomach churned with nerves. Was this a genuine olive branch or just another performance? But then I remembered Lucy's words, "You can love your children without laying yourself on the altar." I straightened my shoulders and knocked. Dana opened the door. She wore a plain cardigan, her hair pulled into a simple ponytail. No designer jewelry, no perfume cloud. She looked ordinary. Human. "Georgia," she said softly, stepping aside. "Thank you for coming." The apartment was tidy but sparse. Second-hand furniture. A small table set with mismatched plates. The scent of roasted chicken and garlic filled the air. Ryan appeared from the kitchen, apron tied clumsily around his waist. His face lit up with something I hadn't seen in years, nervous pride. "Mom," he said, wiping his hands, "come sit. Dinner's almost ready." I sat at the table, fingers brushing the rough surface. Dana poured water into my glass, not wine. The gesture was oddly humbling. For so long, every meal with them had been about excess, about impressing someone else. Tonight felt different. When Ryan set the chicken on the table, I couldn't help but smile. It was slightly overcooked, edges crisped too dark. But it was theirs. Cooked, not bought. Earned, not swiped. We ate mostly in silence at first. Then Ryan cleared his throat. "Mom, I want to say something before we go any further. I was wrong. About everything. About laughing that night, about letting Dana speak to you that way, about using your money like it was endless. I treated you like a resource, not like my mother. I'm ashamed." Dana set her fork down. "And I want to say, I mocked you because it was easier than admitting I was jealous. Jealous of your independence. Jealous that you had what I didn't, a sense of control over your life. I wanted your money because I thought it would make me strong. But it made me weak. It made us both weak. Their honesty cut deeper than their cruelty had. Because it sounded real. Because it left them exposed. I won't pretend words fix years, I said finally. They don't. But this is a start. Ryan nodded. We know we can't ask for anything. Not money. Not even forgiveness. All we're asking is the chance to show you we can be different. For a long moment, I studied their faces. They looked older somehow, not in years, but in wear. Stripped of the illusions money had bought them, they seemed closer to the people I had once hoped they'd be. After dinner, Dana brought out a pie. Homemade, she said almost shyly. Not store-bought. It was uneven, the crust patchy, but when I tasted it, it was sweet with effort. When the dishes were cleared, Ryan handed me an envelope. My heart clenched. Old reflexes screamed another bill, another demand. But when I opened it, I found a check for $200. It's not much, he said quickly. But it's a start. A repayment. For the car insurance you covered last year. I know it doesn't make up for everything. But we want to chip away at it. Slowly. Honestly. I stared at the check, my throat tight. It wasn't the money. $200 was nothing compared to what I'd lost. But it was the gesture. The first time in 10 years that anything had flowed in my direction. I'll accept it, I said softly, folding the check into my purse. Not because I need the money. But because I need to see the intent. Ryan's eyes brimmed with tears. Dana reached for his hand. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope, not naive, not blind. Just cautious hope. As I drove home, the locket at my throat felt warm against my skin. Release didn't mean cutting ties entirely. Sometimes, it meant loosening them enough to let people grow, or fail, on their own. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked different. Not lonely. Not heavy. Just mine. A fortress, but also a sanctuary. I went inside, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat by the window. For years, I had measured my worth by how much I could give. Tonight, for the first time, I measured it by how much I could keep. The phone buzzed. A message from Ryan. Thank you for coming tonight, Mom. We'll keep trying. I promised. I set the phone down without replying. Promises didn't move me anymore. Actions would. And for once, I was willing to wait and see. The following week passed quietly, almost unnervingly so. No frantic calls, no pounding on the door, no guilt-soaked messages on my answering machine. For the first time in more than a decade, the silence in my house wasn't ominous, it was peaceful. I found myself waking up earlier, eager for the day. I'd sit on the patio with a cup of coffee, watching the sun rise over the rooftops, the birds darting around the feeder. Simple moments, yet they felt luxurious because they were mine. I no longer had to brace myself for Ryan or Dana's next emergency. On Tuesday, Lucy leaned over the garden fence, her hands covered in dirt from planting marigolds. Georgia, she called, are you still up for our pottery class on Thursday? I blinked. Pottery class? She had mentioned it briefly before the cruise, but at the time, I had brushed it off. I don't know if I'm any good with clay, I admitted. Lucy grinned. That's the point. None of us are good at first. It's about making a mess and laughing at ourselves. You've done enough serious living. It's time for some fun. I agreed. Thursday evening, we walked into a small art studio downtown. The room smelled of wet earth and glaze. 10 other women, most of them around my age, were already gathered, aprons tied around their waists. The instructor, a lively man named Marco, clapped his hands. Tonight, he said, you will create bowls that may or may not be round, but they will be yours. I laughed out loud, a sound I hadn't recognized in myself for years. As my hands pressed into the spinning clay, it collapsed, wobbled, and splattered across my apron. Lucy cackled beside me. Yours looks like a pancake, Georgia. So does yours. I shot back, and we both dissolved into laughter. For once, failure felt liberating. There was no judgment, no debt, no obligation, just messy joy.by. The end of class, my bowl looked more like a lopsided hat. But when Marco set it on the drying rack, I felt an odd swell of pride. It didn't matter how it looked. What mattered was that it existed. Something I had made, for no other purpose than my own delight. That night, as I washed clay from my fingernails, I thought about how small decisions can reshape a life. Pottery class wasn't just about clay. It was about reclaiming the right to create, to fail, to enjoy. The next morning, I made another decision, to travel more. Not cruises or expensive resorts, but small trips that nourished me. A weekend in the mountains, a day trip to the botanical gardens, maybe even a visit to the town where I grew up. For so long, my world had shrunk to the radius of Ryan and Dana's demands. Now, it was expanding again. At the bank later that week, the manager greeted me warmly. Mrs. Whitlock, everything seems to be in order with your accounts. Would you like us to set up a separate travel fund for you? A travel fund. The idea thrilled me. Yes, I said firmly. Let's do that. As he entered the details, I realized something important. For years, every dollar I saved went toward the vague goal of family emergencies. Now, those same dollars would serve a new purpose: me. My adventures. My peace. My joy. On Saturday, I drove out to the local farmers market. Stalls overflowed with fresh bread, flowers, and jars of honey. A folk band played under a white tent. Children ran between their parents' legs, their laughter echoing in the warm air. I bought myself a bouquet of sunflowers and a jar of wildflower honey. Simple indulgences, but I carried them like trophies. When I placed the flowers in a vase back home, my kitchen seemed brighter, fuller, alive. That evening, Ryan called. His voice was steady, less frantic than I was used to. Mom, we moved into the smaller apartment today. Dana and I carried every box ourselves. No movers, no extras. It feels humbling. I'm glad to hear it, I said. He hesitated. We also sold some furniture. Things we didn't need. We put the money toward paying down a credit card. That's good, Ryan. That's very good. For a moment, I thought he might ask for something. Old habits die hard. But instead, he just said, I hope you're doing well, Mom. Really? When I hung up, I realized my hands weren't trembling. There was no dread, no expectation. Just a quiet conversation with my son. Maybe, just maybe, we were learning how to be a family again, not a bank and its clients. That night, I stood at my window, looking at the stars. I thought about all the years I had spent living for others, the guilt that had weighed me down, the laughter that had stung like knives. And then I thought about clay bowls, sunflowers, and future trips. Why life wasn't over at 68. It was, in many ways, just beginning. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of crisp light that makes everything feel cleaner, sharper. I brewed my coffee and stepped out onto the patio, my lopsided clay bowl sitting proudly on the small table beside me. It was still drying, but I liked to look at it. It reminded me that even imperfection could be beautiful when it was born out of freedom. I hadn't heard from Dana since her tentative apology, but I knew she was out there, strategizing, recalibrating. People like her rarely accept defeat. Still, I felt steadier now, less vulnerable to her manipulation. Around mid-morning, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Elaine, my sister. Georgia, call me when you can. I just spoke with Ryan. I sighed. It was only a matter of time before they tried to use Elaine again. I dialed, Georgia. She answered immediately. I'm worried about you. I'm fine, Elaine. Better than fine. Ryan said you've been cutting him off, leaving him stranded, making extreme decisions. Are you sure you're thinking clearly? There it was again, that insinuation, planted like a weed, that I wasn't in my right mind. Elaine, let me ask you something, I said calmly. How much money have you given your adult children in the past 10 years? Not much. They've been independent since college. Why? Because in that same 10 years, I've given Ryan and Dana more than $86,000. And in return, I got laughter, mockery, and humiliation. Does that sound like the behavior of a daughter-in-law who sees me as family? Elaine was silent for a long moment. I didn't realize it was that much. Exactly. Nobody realizes, because I kept it quiet. Out of love. Out of shame. Out of habit. But not anymore. Still, Georgia, Elaine, stop. I've made my decisions. If you can't support me, then please, at least don't undermine me. I ended the call gently but firmly. For the first time in our relationship, I had drawn a boundary with my sister. It felt strangely exhilarating. That afternoon, I received another unexpected visitor. This time it was Pastor Thomas from church. A kind man in his 70s, but I could see in his eyes that he wasn't there on his own initiative. Georgia, he began after I welcomed him into my living room. I've heard some concerns from Ryan and Dana. They say you've become distant, withdrawn. They're worried about you. I almost laughed. The irony was overwhelming. For 10 years, they hadn't worried about me, my health, my loneliness, my sacrifices. And now, when their access to my wallet was gone, suddenly they were concerned? Pastor Thomas, I said, choosing my words carefully, have Ryan and Dana told you how much of my pension has gone toward their lifestyle? His eyebrows knit together. Well, no, not in detail. Have they told you that when Ryan lost his job, I paid his rent for 8 months? That I bought Dana a wardrobe worth thousands of dollars? That I paid for their vacations, their car down payment, their endless expenses while they laughed at me in my own living room? The pastor shifted uncomfortably. I wasn't aware. Of course not. They wouldn't tell you that. They would only tell you I've suddenly become unreasonable. He hesitated, then said softly, Georgia, as your pastor, I want to remind you of forgiveness. Family is not a license to exploit, I interrupted, my voice firmer than I expected. Forgiveness does not mean servitude. And I will not confuse the two anymore. The old man nodded slowly, perhaps realizing he'd walked into a situation far more complex than Ryan and Dana had described. I see, he murmured. Perhaps I need to hear the full story before giving counsel. Yes, I said. Perhaps you do. When he left, I felt lighter. Another test passed. Another attempt at manipulation deflected. Monday morning, Lucy dropped by with 2 coffees in hand. You survived the pastor visit, she teased. I chuckled. Word travels fast. Small towns, she shrugged. Besides, I could tell by the look on his face when he left that you gave him more than a sermon. We sat on the patio sipping our lattes. Lucy leaned in. Georgia, you know what you need? A project. Something that isn't about Ryan, isn't about the past. Something that's just yours. What kind of project? Anything. A hobby, a volunteer job, even starting a little side business. You have years of experience, wisdom, and frankly, financial savvy. Why not use it for yourself instead of everyone else? Her words stayed with me long after she left. A project. A purpose beyond survival. For so long, my purpose had been financing Ryan and Dana. Now, I could create something new. That evening, I opened my laptop and began searching. Volunteer opportunities. Community classes. Senior travel groups. Even online forums for women who had gone through similar experiences. The possibilities stretched before me like an open road. For the first time in decades, I wasn't thinking about how to save my son from his poor decisions. I was thinking about how to save myself from a half-lived life. Later that week, Ryan called again. But this time, his voice was different, quieter, less frantic. Mom, Dana and I made our first full budget this week. No credit cards, no outside money. Just our salaries. And? I asked. It was hard. We had to cut almost everything. Restaurants, shopping, even some subscriptions. Dana cried when she realized we couldn't afford the gym she liked. But then, she admitted she felt relieved too. She said it was the first time in years she actually understood where our money was going. I was silent, letting him fill the space. Mom, he continued, I don't expect you to believe me yet. But I want to prove we can do this. I want to prove I can be the kind of son you deserve. Something shifted in me then. Not forgiveness, not yet. But maybe the tiniest seed of hope. That night, as I climbed into bed, I reflected on everything that had changed. In just a few weeks, I had gone from being a broken, mocked woman trembling with rage to someone who laughed over clay bowls, planted sunflowers in her kitchen, and dreamed about projects yet to come. And though Ryan and Dana's journey was just beginning, mine had already taken its first confident steps. I turned off the light with a small smile. For once, I wasn't dreading tomorrow. I was looking forward to it. The following Tuesday dawned bright and cool, a hint of autumn in the air. I sat on the patio with my coffee, staring at my little clay bowl, and thought about Lucy's words. A project. Something that was mine for years. Every ounce of energy had gone into Ryan and Dana's wants. Now, with that weight lifted, I found myself restless. My hands wanted to build, my mind wanted to plan. That morning, I drove into town and stopped by the community center. A flyer on the bulletin board caught my eye. Financial literacy workshop for young adults, volunteers needed. I stood frozen for a moment, staring at the words. Financial literacy. If anyone knew about the cost of financial ignorance, about enabling, dependency, and the blurred lines between love and money, it was me. The receptionist noticed me reading. You'd be perfect for that, Mrs. Whitlock. We're always looking for mentors, especially people with life experience. Life experience. I almost laughed. 10 years of being used, humiliated, and drained had certainly given me plenty of that. Sign me up, I said. On Thursday evening, I found myself in a room full of college kids and 20-somethings. They slouched in their chairs, fiddling with their phones, clearly dragged there by professors or parents. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the front slowly, deliberately. My name is Georgia, I began, and I want to tell you a story about what happens when you don't understand money, or boundaries. For the next 20 minutes, I told them about Ryan and Dana. Not all the humiliating details, but enough to make them listen. I explained how giving without limits had trapped not only me but also them. How money without responsibility isn't love, it's poison. By the time I finished, the room was silent. Then a young woman in the front row raised her hand. So, you're saying the best way to love your family is to say no sometimes? Exactly, I said. No is not cruelty. No is sometimes the kindest word you can give. When the workshop ended, several students came up to thank me. One young man admitted he had been draining his grandmother's savings without thinking about what it did to her. I didn't realize how selfish it was until tonight, he confessed. Driving home, I felt something I hadn't in years: purpose. Maybe this was my project. To take all those years of pain and turn them into something useful for others. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Dana. I hesitated but answered. Georgia, she said, her voice unusually calm, I heard you've been volunteering at the community center. So word had already traveled. Small towns rarely keep secrets. Yes, I replied evenly. Why? There was a pause. I think it's admirable, she said slowly. Actually, I was wondering if you'd consider giving me some advice about budgeting. I don't want to make the same mistakes again. The cynic in me bristled. Was this genuine, or just another manipulation? Still, something about her tone seemed softer, less rehearsed. What kind of advice? I asked. I don't even know where to start, she admitted. Ryan and I tried making a budget, but it feels overwhelming. Maybe if we sat down with you, you could walk us through it. I hesitated. A part of me wanted to slam the door on that request. But another part whispered that this might be the first real step toward change. I'll think about it, I said. That evening, Lucy stopped by with a bottle of wine. We sat on the patio, watching the sky fade from gold to navy. So, Dana wants budgeting advice, I told her. Lucy snorted. Careful. That could just be another way to sneak back into your wallet. I know. But what if it's not? What if they're actually ready to learn? Lucy sipped her wine thoughtfully. Then you teach them. But on your terms. No money. No bailouts. Just knowledge. Her words made sense. Teaching wasn't the same as financing. Guidance wasn't the same as enabling. On Saturday afternoon, Ryan and Dana came over. For the first time in years, they brought something with them, homemade lasagna in a casserole dish. We thought we'd cook tonight, Dana said, holding the dish out like an offering. I nodded slowly. All right. Let's see what you've got. After dinner, we sat at the table with their pile of bills, pay stubs, and notebooks. I felt like a teacher again, not a victim. First rule, I said firmly. You spend less than you earn. Always. No exceptions. They nodded. Second rule. Luxuries are not necessities. Netflix, gym memberships, eating out, they're extras. You cut them first, not your rent or insurance. Dana scribbled notes furiously. Ryan looked pale, but he kept nodding. Third rule. You build an emergency fund before you even think about vacations or new clothes. Otherwise, every little problem becomes a crisis. By the end of the night, they looked exhausted. But there was something in their eyes I hadn't seen before. Humility. As they left, Ryan hugged me. Thanks, Mom. Not for money. For this. That night, as I sat in my armchair with the last of the wine, I felt something shift again. For the first time, maybe just maybe, I believed that change was possible, not guaranteed. Not easy. But possible, and for me, that was enough. The following week, I was in the grocery store when I felt the weight of stares. Not hostile, but curious, lingering eyes that whispered behind cupped hands. At first, I thought it was my imagination. But then I overheard a woman near the produce aisle murmur to her friend, "That's the one who cut off her son." My chest tightened. So, the rumors had spread. Ryan and Dana's humiliation at the Crestview Grill had apparently become public property. In a small town, nothing stayed private for long. As I picked out apples, another woman I vaguely recognized from church approached. Georgia, she said with a strained smile, I just wanted to say. I hope you're doing all right. People are talking, you know. But I told them, a mother wouldn't just cut off her children without a reason. There it was again, the implication that I had to justify myself. That I was guilty until proven innocent. I straightened my shoulders. You're right, I said calmly. No mother should have to cut off her children. But no child should treat their mother like a wallet, either. Her eyes widened slightly, and she nodded, embarrassed. Of course, of course. I walked away, my basket heavy with fruit but my heart heavier still. That evening, Lucy came over for tea. I told her what had happened. She shook her head. Let them talk, Georgia. People always need gossip. Today it's you. Tomorrow it'll be someone else. I know, I sighed. But it stings. For years, I was the quiet, reliable one. The woman who sacrificed, who gave without question. And now, when I finally say no, I'm the villain. Lucy's eyes softened. Sometimes, doing the right thing makes you the villain in other people's stories. But you're not living their story anymore. You're living yours. Her words wrapped around me like a blanket. The following Saturday, Dana surprised me. She asked if she could come over alone. I agreed, curious. She arrived without makeup, her hair pulled back, wearing simple jeans and a sweater. Not her usual polished armor. She sat at my kitchen table, twisting her hands. Georgia, she began, her voice low, I need to tell you something. Something I've never admitted before. I waited. When I first married Ryan, I thought we'd build a life together. But the truth is, I liked the lifestyle more than the reality. I liked the vacations, the restaurants, the image. And when you kept helping us? I leaned into it. Too much. I made Ryan believe it was normal. I studied her face, looking for cracks of insincerity. But her eyes were wet, her expression raw. Do you know what scared me most at the restaurant that day? She continued. Not the humiliation. Not the bill. It was realizing that without your money, we didn't know how to survive. We were children playing dress up as adults. I felt my throat tighten. For the first time, Dana wasn't the cunning manipulator. She was just a flawed human being, finally stripped of her defenses. Why are you telling me this now? I asked quietly, because I want to change. And I need you to know that. Not because I expect you to give us money again. But because if I don't say it out loud, I'll never break free of it. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The clock ticked softly in the background. Finally, I said, change isn't words, Dana. It's choices. Consistent ones. If you truly want to change, then show me. Live differently. Prove it, not for me, but for yourself. She nodded slowly, tears sliding down her cheeks. I will. That night, after she left, I sat in the quiet house thinking about everything. Dana's confession had unsettled me, not because I didn't believe her, but because I did. For years, I had painted her as the villain and myself as the victim. But the truth was murkier. We had all played our roles in this toxic dance. I gave too much. Ryan avoided responsibility. Dana craved status. Together, we created a cycle that devoured us all. The question now was whether we could create something different. The next morning, Ryan called. Mom, he said, Dana told me she talked to you. She came home different. Quieter. Like something finally hit her. I don't know what you said, but thank you. I hesitated, then replied, Ryan, it's not about what I said. It's about what she chooses from now on. And what you choose, too. There was a pause. Then he said softly, we're trying, Mom. Really? That evening, I journaled for the first time in years. I wrote about the restaurant. The cancelled cards, the threats, the manipulations. But also about pottery classes, sunflowers. And laughter. As I put the pen down, I realized something important. I wasn't just reclaiming my finances. I was reclaiming my voice, and for a woman who had been silent for too long, that was the greatest wealth of all. The following week, my project at the community center grew. What had started as a single talk turned into a weekly series. Each Thursday, a dozen young adults gathered in that drafty classroom. Notebooks open, eyes alert. I shared not only the technical side of budgeting and saving but also the emotional traps, how guilt, pride, and family dynamics can ruin even the best financial plan. Money, I told them one evening, isn't just numbers on a page. It's trust. It's freedom. And sometimes it's the weapon people use against you, or the chain you use against yourself. They listened, really listened. Some came up afterward with stories of their own, parents in debt from paying for endless weddings, grandparents drained by spoiled grandchildren, couples fighting because one partner hid credit card bills. Each story reminded me that I wasn't alone. My situation wasn't unique. Exploitation, masked as love, was everywhere. Then, on Saturday night, the phone rang. Ryan. His voice was different this time, strained, tense, but not angry. Mom, I don't know what to do, he admitted. Our car broke down. The repair shop says it's going to be at least $1,200 to fix. We don't have that kind of money. I closed my eyes, the familiar tug of panic pulling at me. The old Georgia would have rushed to write a check, no questions asked. But the new Georgia took a deep breath. Ryan, I said slowly, this is your first real emergency since we cut ties financially. How you handle this will set the tone for everything that follows. There was silence. Then, so, you're not going to help? I'll give you advice, I replied. Not money. Not anymore. His breathing was ragged. We don't have savings. We were just starting to build one. And without a car, I can't get to work. Dana can't either. Then it's time to make hard choices, I said. Can you borrow a car? Carpool? Use public transit? Can you negotiate with the repair shop for a payment plan? Can you sell something non-essential to cover the cost? But, Mom, no, Ryan. This is the moment you either grow up or fall apart. I can't do it for you. His voice cracked. I feel like you're abandoning me. Son, I'm not abandoning you. I'm teaching you to stand. I should have done this years ago. That night, I barely slept. The maternal instinct in me screamed that I had been cruel. But beneath the guilt was something else, clarity. If I rescued him again, the cycle would never end. The next afternoon, Ryan called back. His voice was steadier. We sold the second TV, he said. And Dana pawned some jewelry she never wore. It wasn't enough for all of it, but the mechanic agreed to a payment plan if we put down $600. We'll cover the rest over the next 3 months. I felt my chest swell with both pride and sorrow. Pride that they had solved their problem. Sorrow that it had taken so long for them to even try. Ryan, I said softly, that's what adults do. They find a way. I'm proud of you. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, "Thanks, Mom, for not saving us. For once." The following Thursday, I told my workshop students about Ryan's car. Not the personal details, but enough for them to understand the lesson. Emergencies will always come, I told them. You can't predict them, but you can prepare for them. And if you can't prepare, you can adapt. The worst thing you can do is panic and expect someone else to fix it. Several heads nodded. A young man in the back raised his hand. "Did your son hate you for not helping?" I smiled sadly. "Maybe at first. But later, he thanked me. Sometimes love looks like saying no." That weekend, I treated myself to something small but symbolic. A new pair of walking shoes, comfortable, sturdy, with bright blue laces. I laced them up and went for a stroll through the park, the crisp air biting at my cheeks. For once, every step felt like it belonged to me. As I walked, I passed a mother pushing a stroller, her toddler giggling as leaves crunched underfoot. The woman looked tired but content. And I thought, that used to be me. Giving, sacrificing, pouring everything into someone else, and then I thought, that still can be me. But only when I choose it. Only when it's healthy. That night, as I sat with a cup of chamomile tea, I realized something profound. I hadn't just reclaimed my finances. I had reclaimed my motherhood. By refusing to be Ryan's ATM, I had finally given him the gift he needed most, the chance to become a man, and for me? I had given myself the gift I had needed most, the chance to live as a woman. Not just a mother, not just a provider, for the first time in years. I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was curious. The next few weeks felt like the calm after a storm. My house was quieter, lighter. I found myself humming as I cleaned the kitchen, laughing at small things like Lucy's gardening mishaps or the way my clay bowl sagged even more after firing. Life had a gentleness I hadn't tasted in years, but life has a way of testing us just when we think we've found our balance point. One Tuesday morning, as I prepared my notes for the community center workshop, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. On the other end was a woman named Susan, a journalist for the local paper. "Mrs. Whitlock," she began, "I've heard about your volunteer work teaching financial literacy. Some of the students spoke very highly of you. I'd like to do a feature on your program, on you." My heart thudded. Me? On the front page? For something other than being Ryan's mother? "I'm not sure I'm the right person," I said cautiously, but Susan was persuasive. "Your story could help others. So many families are quietly going through the same struggles. You'd be giving a voice to people who feel trapped." By the time I hung up, I had agreed to an interview. The article came out the following Sunday. The headline read, "Local Widow Turns Pain into Purpose, Teaching Financial Independence at 68. There was a photo of me at the community center, speaking in front of a whiteboard. My expression animated, my hands mid-gesture. The article detailed my workshops, my philosophy. And yes, without naming Ryan or Dana, it spoke of how I had learned to set boundaries after years of financial dependence from loved ones. The reaction was immediate. Neighbors stopped me at the grocery store to congratulate me. Women from church whispered that they wished they had my courage. Even the teller at the bank smiled knowingly as she handed me my receipt. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't just Ryan's mom or the woman who lived alone in the house on Maple Street. I was Georgia Whitlock, a woman with a voice, but recognition has its shadows. That same evening, Ryan showed up at my door, his expression a storm. "Mom," he said, holding the paper, "what the hell is this?" I invited him in, but he didn't sit. "You told the whole town our business. Everyone knows you're talking about us." "I didn't name you," I said calmly, "you didn't have to." His voice cracked. "People aren't stupid. They know who you meant." "Dana's humiliated. I'm humiliated. Do you realize what this does to my reputation?" There it was again, his reputation. His image. "Ryan," I said quietly, "this isn't about you. This is about me. My story. My choices. But it makes us look like parasites." "Then maybe you should think about why it fits," I replied, my voice sharper than I intended. He flinched. For a moment, he looked like a little boy again, hurt, ashamed, cornered. "Mom." His voice softened. "I know we messed up. But airing it out like this, it feels like betrayal." I took a deep breath. Betrayal is laughing when your wife calls your mother nothing but a bank. Betrayal is draining me for a decade while I lived like a pauper. Sharing my story to help others is not betrayal, it's survival. We stood there in silence, the air thick with years of unspoken words. Finally, Ryan sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "I don't know how to fix this," he whispered. "You fix it," I said gently, "by living differently. By proving to yourself, to Dana, to everyone, that you can stand on your own. My story doesn't define you. Your actions do." 2 days later, I received an unexpected call from Dana. Georgia, she said, her tone weary but surprisingly calm. I read the article. At first, I was furious. But then, I realized something. "You weren't wrong." Her honesty stunned me. You made me see myself through other people's eyes, she continued. And I didn't like what I saw. The spending, the vanity, the entitlement, it was all there. I hate that it had to come out this way, but maybe it was the wake-up call we needed. For the first time, I believed her. Truly believed her. That weekend, the community center was packed. Word of the article had spread, and more young adults showed up than ever before. As I stood at the front, looking out over the crowded room, I realized something remarkable. My pain hadn't just transformed me. It was transforming others. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was leading, and somewhere in the back of the room, I saw Ryan slip in quietly, his arms crossed, his expression guarded. But he stayed. He listened. And when it was over, he didn't storm out. He walked up to me, hesitated, and simply said, "Good job, Mom." It wasn't much. But it was something. The following week, the article about my volunteer work made its way beyond the town limits. One morning, while sipping coffee on my patio, I opened an email from a regional nonprofit that specialized in financial education for seniors. They had read the piece and wanted me to speak at a larger event, a conference in the city. "Your perspective is unique, Mrs. Whitlock," the coordinator wrote. "So often, financial abuse is spoken about in terms of strangers or scams. Rarely do we hear about it when the perpetrators are family. Your voice could make a difference." I sat with the email open for a long time. Me? Speaking at a conference? I had spent years shrinking myself to fit into Ryan and Dana's expectations. The thought of standing on a stage, telling my story to hundreds, felt terrifying. And yet, thrilling. I replied with a single word, yes. The conference was scheduled for late spring, but the anticipation gave me energy. I spent hours preparing notes, practicing in front of the mirror, even timing myself with a kitchen clock. Lucy teased me about turning into a professor, but I saw pride in her eyes. Meanwhile, Ryan called less frequently, but when he did, his tone was different, less demanding, more thoughtful. One evening he surprised me with a simple question, "Mom, what do you eat for dinner most nights?" I laughed. "Whatever I feel like." "Why?" "Because Dana and I realized we've never asked. We just assumed you were fine. But we never really thought about your day-to-day." The honesty of that pierced me. "I'm fine, Ryan. Really. But thank you for asking." It wasn't a grand gesture. It was better. It was awareness. Then came the call that changed everything. It was nearly midnight when my phone buzzed. Ryan's number. My stomach clenched, old instincts kicking in. "Mom," he said, his voice shaking, "I'm at the hospital. Dana had a miscarriage." The words dropped like stones into the silence of my living room. "Oh, Ryan," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." He broke down on the line, sobbing in a way I hadn't heard since he was a child. "She was only 8 weeks. We hadn't told anyone yet. We were going to surprise you at dinner next month. And now," his voice cracked. "She's devastated. I don't know what to do." I felt a wave of sorrow wash over me. For all our battles, for all the anger and manipulation, they were still human, hurting, fragile. "Lost. I'm coming to the hospital," I said. "Mom, no. You don't have to, I want to," I interrupted firmly. "Stay with Dana. I'll be there soon." When I arrived, the fluorescent lights of the maternity ward cast everything in a sterile glow. Ryan sat slumped in a plastic chair, his face blotchy with tears. Dana lay in the bed, pale and silent, her eyes red-rimmed. When she saw me, she whispered, "Georgia." I walked to her side, took her cold hand, and simply said, "I'm here." No lectures. No boundaries. No history. Just presence. 4 hours, I sat with them, Ryan holding Dana's other hand. The three of us bound by grief rather than money or conflict. At dawn. When Dana finally drifted into an exhausted sleep, Ryan leaned toward me. "Mom, thank you." "For what?" I asked softly. "For not giving up on us. Even when we made it so hard." His eyes glistened. "I thought money was everything. But right now, I'd give up every dollar in the world just to take her pain away." I squeezed his hand. "Now you're starting to understand." That week was one of the hardest. Dana was fragile, moving between silence and tears. Ryan tried to be strong, but I saw the cracks. And for the first time in years, I stepped into their lives, not as a provider of money, but as a mother. I cooked meals, sat quietly in their apartment, listened when they needed to talk, and stayed silent when they didn't. It was strange. In losing something they had wanted so badly, they finally began to see me not as a resource, but as a person. One evening, Dana looked at me with swollen eyes. "Georgia, I used to resent you for saying no. But now I see. You were teaching us to stand. If we hadn't started learning, this would have destroyed us completely. Instead, we're still here. Bruised, but standing." Tears blurred my vision. "Dana, grief has a way of stripping away what doesn't matter. What's left is what's real." She nodded slowly. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something. This was the true test. Not whether I could cancel credit cards or say no to vacations, but whether I could show up for my family in pain, without losing myself again, for once. I believed I could. The weeks following Dana's miscarriage felt like walking a tightrope between sorrow and resilience. I visited their apartment often, but never empty-handed with money, only with food, warmth, and presents. A pot of chicken soup, a basket of fresh bread, a vase of flowers from my garden. Each time, Dana's face softened a little more. She would whisper, "Thank you," not with the entitlement of old, but with the fragile sincerity of someone who had been cracked open by loss. Ryan, too, changed in quiet ways. He no longer bragged about things he couldn't afford. Instead, he spoke of saving, of cutting corners, of simply surviving the month without debt. It was as though grief had stripped away the glossy veneer, leaving two raw souls trying to rebuild on honest ground. Meanwhile, the conference loomed closer. I spent evenings practicing in front of Lucy, who sat cross-legged on my couch with a notebook. "Too many statistics," she said after one run-through. "People will forget numbers. They'll remember your story." So I rewrote, focusing less on dollar amounts and more on the human cost: Christmases spent alone, laughter at my expense, the quiet ache of being invisible in my own family. Each retelling stung less and healed more. One night, as I rehearsed the part about canceling the credit cards, my voice broke. For the first time in years, I said, I felt peace. Not because I had money again, but because I had myself again. Lucy dabbed her eyes. "That's it, Georgia. That's the heart of it." A week before the conference, Ryan called. "Mom," he said hesitantly, "Dana and I want to come hear you speak." I was stunned. "Are you sure? It might be hard to listen." "That's why we need to," he replied. "We want to understand, not just the facts, but what it felt like for you. We owe you that." His words landed like sunlight on a cold morning. The day of the conference arrived. The auditorium buzzed with voices, hundreds of attendees, community leaders, educators, even reporters. As I stood backstage clutching my notes, my hands trembled. Then I saw Ryan and Dana slip into seats near the middle, their faces solemn but supportive. My knees steadied. When my name was called, I walked onto the stage to polite applause. The spotlight blinded me at first, but then my eyes adjusted. And I began. "I am 68 years old," I said, my voice carrying through the room. "And I spent a decade as my son's personal ATM." The audience stilled. For years, I told myself it was love. That paying his rent, his vacations, his luxuries was my duty as a mother. But what I really gave him wasn't love, it was chains. Chains for him, and chains for me. I spoke for 30 minutes, weaving my personal story with lessons about boundaries, dignity, and the courage to say no. When I described canceling the credit cards, people nodded. When I recalled being laughed at in my own living room, faces tightened with outrage. And when I ended with the line, "Sometimes the most loving word you can say is no," the room erupted in applause. Afterward, people crowded around me, young adults thanking me for opening their eyes, older women whispering that they finally felt seen. But what mattered most was Ryan. He approached slowly, his eyes wet. "Mom," he said hoarsely, "I never knew it hurt you like that. I never saw it. Hearing you today, I feel ashamed. But also grateful. Because you didn't give up on me. You gave me the chance to grow." Dana stood beside him, her hand in his. "You gave us more than money, Georgia. You gave us back our marriage. Without your no, we might never have faced the truth." Tears spilled down my cheeks as I pulled them both into an embrace. For the first time, it felt like a family hug, not a transaction, not a manipulation, just love. That evening, back home, I sat on my patio watching the sun sink low. The clay bowl rested on the table, lopsided but strong, a quiet symbol of transformation. My story wasn't just about loss, or betrayal, or even money. It was about reclamation. About finding my voice at 68 and realizing it had been there all along. I lifted my glass of wine toward the fading light and whispered, "Here's to no." And for the first time in years, the word tasted like freedom. The Monday after the conference, my phone rang almost nonstop. Not with demands for money, but with invitations. The local radio station wanted to interview me. A church women's group asked if I could speak at their retreat. Even the library director suggested hosting a financial wellness night, with me as the keynote. It was surreal. For so long, my identity had been the quiet widow, or Ryan's mom. Now, people saw me as a woman with wisdom, a survivor with a story worth telling. I should have been elated. And I was, in many ways. But recognition has a way of stirring old shadows. By Wednesday, whispers began to circulate again, only louder this time. At the grocery store, I overheard one woman say, "Imagine humiliating your own son in public like that. Broadcasting your family's dirty laundry for strangers." At church, another woman clucked her tongue. "Georgia always seemed so generous. Now she's turned cold." I walked past them with my head high, but the words burrowed deep. That evening, Ryan came by, his shoulders slumped. "Mom," he said quietly, "people at work are talking. One guy asked if I really lived off you for 10 years. Another joked about borrowing my mom's credit card." I wanted to punch him. I touched his arm gently. "Ryan, I never set out to shame you. I only wanted to tell the truth." "I know," he sighed. "But it's hard. I feel like I'm wearing a scarlet letter. Everyone knows. Everyone judges." For a moment, I almost apologized. Old habits die hard. But then I caught myself. "Ryan," I said firmly, "you're not defined by what people whisper. You're defined by what you do now. Let them gossip. In time, your choices will speak louder than their words." He looked at me, eyes weary but thoughtful. "You really believe that?" "I do," I said. "Because I'm living proof." A few days later, Dana stopped by on her own. She looked calmer than I'd seen her in months. She set her purse down and said, "Georgia, I need to tell you something." I nodded for her to continue. "After your speech, my mother called. She was furious. Said you made us look like beggars. Said I was stupid for letting myself be cut off. She even suggested I leave Ryan and find someone who could provide properly." Dana's jaw tightened. For the first time in my life, I told her no. I blinked. "You told Claudia no?" "Yes," Dana said, her voice steady. "I told her I'd rather build a smaller life with honesty than a big life built on lies." I think she hung up on me. My heart swelled with something unexpected, pride. "Dana," I said softly, "that's the strongest thing you've ever told me." She gave a small, tired smile. "I think losing the baby changed me. I don't want to spend the rest of my life chasing status or pretending we're richer than we are. I want something real. Even if it's smaller." For once, I believed her. The following Sunday, I hosted Ryan and Dana for lunch. They brought groceries with them, groceries they had bought themselves. Dana chopped vegetables while Ryan grilled chicken. For the first time, my kitchen bustled with life that wasn't fueled by guilt or obligation. As we sat down to eat, Ryan raised his glass of water. "To Mom," he said, his voice thick. "For saying no when we hated her for it. Because that no saved us." Dana clinked her glass against mine. "To Georgia," she added. "The bravest woman I know." Tears blurred my eyes, but they were warm tears this time. Later that week, I sat at my desk, flipping through my notes for an upcoming radio interview. In the margin of one page, I scribbled a reminder to myself, "Remember, this isn't about money. It's about dignity." As I closed the notebook, I realized the irony. For years, I had been terrified of losing my dignity. I thought giving money bought me love, respect, belonging. But in truth, every check I wrote, every bill I paid, chipped away at the very thing I was trying to protect. It wasn't until I said no, until I risked being hated, that I found the dignity I thought I'd lost. That night, I stood on my patio under the stars. The clay bowl sat beside me, crooked but unbroken. I ran my fingers along its uneven rim and whispered, "This is me. Imperfect. Flawed. But whole." And for the first time, I didn't care who was watching, who was whispering, who was judging. I was free. Claudia's knock came on a gray Thursday afternoon. Rain streaked the windows, the kind of steady drizzle that seeps into your bones. I almost didn't answer. But something in me knew the time had come. When I opened the door, she stood there in her immaculate coat, umbrella dripping, lips pressed into a thin line. "Georgia," she said, her tone clipped. "We need to talk." I stepped aside. "Come in." She set her umbrella against the wall and marched into my living room as though it belonged to her. "I'll get straight to the point," she said, perching on the edge of the couch. "You've humiliated my daughter. You've humiliated Ryan. And now, with your little crusade, you've dragged our family name through the mud." I sat across from her, calm. "I've told my story. The truth." Her eyes flashed. "Your truth. One-sided. You've made Dana out to be some spoiled villain, when all she wanted was to build a life worthy of respect." "Respect doesn't come from spending other people's money," I replied evenly. "Respect comes from earning, from integrity. And I won't apologize for saying so." She scoffed. "You've poisoned them against me. Dana barely speaks to me now. She says she wants real life, not appearances. Do you know how ridiculous that sounds? She's throwing away everything I taught her." Something inside me snapped, not with anger, but with clarity. "Claudia," I said softly, "what you taught Dana wasn't life. It was performance. You raised her to value image above truth, luxury above stability, appearances above character. And I enabled it by financing it. But no more." For a moment, Claudia faltered, her face tightening. "You've turned her against her own mother." "No," I said firmly. "I've simply stopped feeding the illusion. Dana is choosing for herself now. That frightens you, doesn't it?" She rose abruptly. "You'll regret this, Georgia. Families don't survive wars like this." I stood too. "This isn't war. This is freedom. And if family can't survive honesty, then maybe it was never family at all. Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing more. With a snap of her umbrella, she stormed out into the rain. That evening, Ryan called. "Mom," he said quietly, "Dana told me what happened. She said you stood up to her mother like a rock." "I just told the truth," I answered. "Dana's different now," he continued. "She's quieter, but stronger. She told me she doesn't want to go back to who she was. And I don't either." I closed my eyes, relief washing over me. "That's all I ever wanted, Ryan. For you to live your own lives, not mine." The day of the radio interview arrived. Sitting in the studio, headphones over my ears, I faced the microphone as the host introduced me. "Our guest today is Georgia Whitlock, a widow who turned personal hardship into a mission to teach financial dignity." When it was my turn, I spoke clearly. "I want people to understand, saying no to financial exploitation isn't cruelty. It's love, real love. Because enabling dependency is a slow kind of poison. It kills trust. It kills respect. And it kills relationships." The phone lines lit up. Callers shared their own stories: mothers drained by adult children, grandparents tricked into paying endless bills, siblings torn apart by entitlement. Each voice was another thread in a tapestry of pain and resilience. By the end of the hour, the host leaned toward me. "Mrs. Whitlock, what would you say to someone listening right now who feels trapped, who feels like an ATM for their family?" I took a deep breath. "I'd say this: you are more than your wallet. Your love is not measured in dollars. And sometimes the bravest, kindest thing you can do is look into the eyes of the people you love most and say, no more." That night, back home, I lit a candle and sat with my journal. Rain tapped against the windows, but inside, the house was warmed out. I thought of the years I'd lost, the dignity I'd sacrificed, the laughter that had cut me like knives. And then I thought of clay bowls, sunflowers, lasagna dinners. And the look on Ryan's face when he said, "Thank you for not saving us, for once." I smiled through tears. At 68. I had finally learned the lesson life had been trying to teach me all along, that love without respect is hollow. That money without boundaries is poison. And that freedom begins the moment you choose yourself. I closed my journal, blew out the candle, and whispered into the quiet, "Here's to the rest of my life." And for the first time in decades, I truly believed it would be mine.